agreement between the European Union and the Southern Common Market, Mercosur. First of all, I would like to thank my colleagues from the Berlin-Brandenburg State Office of the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation for their support and effort in organizing this event. As a liberal foundation, we are committed.
First of all, I would like to thank my colleagues from the Berlin-Brandenburg State Office of the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation.
We as a liberal foundation, we are committed to free markets and a liberal world trade order because we are convinced that this is the right way to open new opportunities and generate prosperity for everyone. In times of crisis, like the one we are facing now, when people worldwide are suffering from hard economic consequences caused by the pandemic, it is even more important to search not only for it is even more important to search not only for short-term policies that contain the problem, but sustainable solutions based on regional cooperation that improve the economic and political conditions for the people. In this context, we would like to discuss the EU-Mercosur agreement that was announced almost a year ago on June 28th. To help us to get a better understanding of the status and discuss the perspective of the agreement in the middle of the crisis, as a way to revive the economies of the EU and Mercosur member states, we have with us today experts from the fields of academia, business, and politics. I am more than pleased to welcome Dr. Mark Heinzel, head of North and Latin America unit at the Association of German Chambers of Industry and Commerce. Thank you for being here with us today. I am also pleased to welcome Mr. Nicolas Albertone. He is Trade Policy Project Lead for the Security and Political Economy Lab at the University of Southern in the USA. Thank you for joining us today also. Also, a warm welcome to Mr. Alexander Kulitz, member of the German Bundestag and spokesperson of the Free Democratic Party on foreign trade and foreign economy issues. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your expertise on this topic with us. Last but not least, I would like to introduce Ms. Britta Sofiebeck, who will lead the discussion. Thank you, Britta, for taking the time to go digital with us today. Before handing the microphone over, I would like to encourage all of you to use our Q&A function. We would like to hear your opinions and questions on this highly discussed topic. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much for your intro. Yeah, a warm welcome from my side too. Thank you for joining us. I would like to remind us and the audience that we are talking about an agreement in principle, meaning that currently the EU-Mercosur Treaty is not yet in place, but it is currently revised by lawyers on the two sides of the Atlantic. After you heard 20 years of negotiation, last year it had been signed, this agreement in principle. But now after the lawyers have finished their work, it has to be translated into 23 languages of the EU. And only then it will be passed to the national parliaments in the EU. And so, yeah, we hope that we are talking about a process that will take some time. Experts are saying that we are talking about years to come. So let's see where we are in 1 or 2 or 3 years with this treaty. But for the time being, it's an agreement in principle. And I hope during our discussion, we will have the time to get some more details and insights on the quotas, on the produce, on many details that are part of this agreement. Just one figure for you, just one fact to illustrate the importance of this treaty. If it will come place one day, it is estimated that about 4 billion euros of duties annually can be saved by European companies, and obviously making selected European produce much more competitive in Latin America. So yeah, this is the European perspective. And now we are more than happy to have you, Nicolas, on board in Los Angeles. This is Pacific daytime, so
Yes.
9 hours behind us. It is 8:05, so early start for you. We're looking forward to get your fresh take on the Latin American perspective on this treaty in your keynote. So, Nicolas.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. And again, yes, good morning from this side of the world. And first, I would like to start saying thank you to the Foundation for setting this up. I think this is a very important and timely conversation to both sides, the Europe and South American side. So I'm glad to have this conversation from very different angles. We are used to see these topics sometimes from only one side of the story, but I think this type of conversation is very constructive, and it's a very good exercise in this time of a lot of nationalism and protectionism narrative. So I hope will be a good conversation from that sense. And again, as Britta mentioned, my contribution here will be more from the Latin American side, and basically have 2 or 3 points to make, and that maybe I'm not able to put in 5 minutes, but I'm sure that they will appear in the Q&A, so I'm happy to follow up that conversation in the Q&A. So first, let me start saying that if there is a single learning from this pandemic nowadays, I think this is that we are entering in an era of international coordination, cooperation, and dialogue. And won't be able, these kind of things, cooperation and dialogue won't be an option for countries, but an obligation, and we really need to coordinate, and we really need this type of conversations if we really like to solve global problems. So I think this is a small exercise of what I think we have to do in this type of context, that we have a huge, very important agreement. Maybe nowadays is the most important agreement in trade in general in the world. So I think it's part of the conversation we could have. And as history has shown, many times the worst scenario in a context like this of a global crisis is economic and political isolation. So I think the conclusion of the EU and Mercosur treaty last year was an enormous signal to the rest of the world, in which most of the conversation, again, was about protectionism. However, and we have to be very clear, and Brita mentioned in the introduction, that the treaty itself was not signed yet. It was concluded, but we know from general IR, and that agreement in general has 4 steps. Negotiation concluded, signed, and ratified. We are only halfway, so it's very important. This is the reason why I think this conversation is very timely to mention that, that we are in a very strong halfway, because after 20 years of negotiation and conversation, the EU and Mercosur agreement was concluded, and this is very important. But again, we really need to sign a ratified agreement, that this will be a part of a very important debate in both sides of the Atlantic. And however, I think the presidencies of Germany in the EU and Uruguay in Mercosur, we have to work hard to achieve that point of the signing of the treaty, which will not be easy for many reasons. First, of a matter of policy priorities, and governments are trying to see if they can survive tomorrow, given this pandemic. And second, I think will be difficult to find and to imagine we will have big multilateral events soon that are normally the context, in which this type of agreement is signed. Or maybe we can follow the recent just signed digital economy partnership agreement between Chile, New Zealand, and Singapore. That if you didn't follow up that, and it was interesting because it was an online ceremony, and it was the first time in history of an e-signature agreement. It makes sense because they are talking about a digital economy partnership agreement. But anyway, these real life struggles, and challenges is something that we'll have to face if we want to sign the agreement before the end of the year. That again will be a crucial step before the ratification. As you all know, in Latin America, as the rest of the world is suffering the impact of this very difficult COVID pandemic, and trade was not an exception for that. And a recent report of the Inter-American Development Bank shows that, the value of export from Latin America contracted by 3.2% if we compare with the same quarter in 2019. So we are starting to face, of course, this is maybe just the beginning of a huge impact that we will see of this pandemic. Finally, again, just as an introduction, and I will be happy to give more in details about agreement and what we could think from the Latin American side. I think if the agreement could be signed before the end of the year, we are in a very good horizon for the ratification in Latin America, at least in Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay. Not sure yet what could happen in Argentina, but it is important to highlight, though, that one of the key success of this treaty from the Latin American side, and again, this is my last point, is the bilateral ratification. You know, what means that once the EU ratified, let's say next year, or whenever it is ratified from the EU side, the first Mercosur country that ratified, it can start using the agreement. You know, and so in terms of the quotas, that could make a huge difference. You know, I'm sure these two, and that this is not the first time that the Mercosur is using this tool of bilateral ratification, will be a huge motivation for those more complicated countries to ratify it. So I have to stop here, but as part of my intro, but I think, you know, this treaty from both sides is a very balanced treaty and fair treaty, I would say, for both sides of the Atlantic. And I think we have to take advantage of that. And because the worst case scenario here would be to open up the negotiation again, because again, from both sides, I think we took a lot of risk in the agreement. And of course, part of real life in global economy is to compete. But I think this is a very good reason, both regions, to compete and to put some floors and roof in the trade relations. So I'm happy to continue the conversation in the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great, Nicolas. Thank you very much for compressing your points in just five little minutes. I know that there's more to get. But anyhow, what we heard is that you really are stressing the next 6 months as being vital in the application of this treaty, and it happens to be just within the German presidency. So could be interesting to see how this is playing out. Thank you very much, Nicolas. So we are switching to Dr. Mark Heinzel, who is just in his office and representing the Association of German Chambers of Industry and Commerce, and who will give us his take, the German take on the treaty between Mercosur and EU. So Dr. Heinzel, we're happy to have you with us. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to all of you. I'll begin how an old man begins. A long time ago. Okay, good. When I was young. 1998, I used to work for Daimler, which then was Daimler Chrysler, a joint venture which never worked. A colleague from there asked me about, and how are your expectations about the negotiations with Mercosur? We will have an agreement soon, and isn't it great? Okay, this was 1998. After more than 20 years of negotiation, today I'm a rather old man. We are finally at the point where we have something like an agreement in principle with Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. 4 very important, very different countries. We have overcome so many obstacles. We have solved all the beef and quota, soja, and similar discussions. We are d'accord about the keeping of the climate conventions, although there are some problems in implementation. And yes, we have many issues with corruption, with transparency, not only on their side, also on the European side. We have still difficulties in getting the level playing field for every company done in trade, in industry, in investment, in public procurement. But without an agreement, you have no mean to address all these issues to our friends and partners. With an agreement, we have an influence. We can influence each other. We can cooperate better. And I think this is a very important point. Besides all this, we live actually in a rather new situation, and we make new experiences in this situation. We live in a world where we have the corona. We have experienced what it means to be isolated, to have closed borders, not to be able to travel, not to be able to make business, to invest, and so on. The last of us should have understood that the free world, with free trade, with free exchange of goods, with free exchange of experts, with open borders, is really great. A world which works in the way that Mr. Lighthizer from the US government would like to have. He told, I'm in favor of increasing tariffs on the things we need. This is, in my opinion, the wrong way. So therefore, I think we have to go on. We have to sign, we have to ratify, and we have to put to forth this agreement. Not only, but also to show all these which want a protectionist world, that we really, really want an open world, a competitive world, a world where everybody has a profit from partners and friends. And I think this matter is very important. Something about German economy, German business, German companies. A vast majority of them wants the agreement. Many German companies are active in Latin America. Most of them are active in the Mercosur. And this moment we have direct investment of about 2,000 companies all over Latin America, 1,200 in South America, to about 800 in Central America. Where do you think most of these investments are? They're in Brazil, they're in Mexico, and in Argentina. So 2 of the 3 most important countries for German economy, for European economy in general, are in the Mercosur. So we need to get closer to those friends, to increase trade in both sides, to increase investment, to increase cooperation, and to get them closer to us and us closer to them. I think it's very important. And well, this is all what I have to say. We cannot stop now after we have wasted. It would mean that we have wasted half our lives in negotiating an agreement, which we really need. We cannot stop now.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Heinzel. That was a strong plaidoyer, obviously, against protectionism, against isolation, and just pushing through and going through to just reinvigorate the global economy after COVID-19 has passed. So hopefully, yes, we are able to talk about that. So thank you very much for the German, for the economic perspective. I bet there is a man in Barcelona who would like to comment and jump in. Alexander Kulitz, you're in Barcelona, right?
Yes, at the moment I am. I just come from a meeting with the Secretary on European and Foreign Affairs from Catalonia, which was quite interesting. We didn't speak about Mercosur though, but I can absolutely agree with what Dr. Heinzel said. It's a huge tragedy that at the moment I don't know how to express it, but the problem is it seems like people are more and more getting into the idea of getting out of multilateral organizations, getting out of working together, of global value chains, thinking about reshoring their production, thinking about protectionistic measures, thinking about nationalisms, and the big problem, I believe, is not only that countries that we sometimes criticize about their nationalistic aspects. We are being just as nationalistic in Europe many times when we start to argue with other regimes, with other countries, and with other systems. And I think definitely we have to stop with this, let me call it colonialization of sustainability. The problem is if we always try to tell others how they should do things right and how things should work, it's not that we always implicate that other countries want to be like we are. And that's, I think, the wrong mistake. And that's what we see after 20 years of negotiating Mercosur. Once again, the whole thing is at stake just to the fact that, okay, in Brazil, we do have differences with the regime at the moment in Brazil, with the government of Brazil, with Jair Bolsonaro especially. But this doesn't mean that after 20 years of negotiation, everything that was negotiated already at the beginning, it's not only, we're not only talking about Brazil. There's two, well, there's 3 other countries, but 2 at the moment that are very much also inflicted. And so let's please stop doing this colonialization of sustainability, because my personal belief is, if we really want that the people in the Mercosur countries, but especially in Brazil, have a change of mindset and try to tell their government and their president that probably it's not the best idea to deforest the Amazonas, and that's what main issue in Europe is all about when we talk about Mercosur. I believe this is only possible if the prosperity promise is also given to the Mercosur countries, including Brazil, because only if the people have the possibility, if they have if they have the possibility, because they are wealthy enough to demand from their government to please stop doing things that they probably will not want themselves, it makes much more sense to help them getting this prosperity level rather than keeping them off the trade and telling them, well, sorry, you guys, you cannot join our European trade just due to the fact as long as you keep on doing things we don't like. So let me give another example. Probably if we look at if we look at Australia and China, we both know these countries have a lot of issues with each other. They are in a systemic competency, both Australia being a democratic system and China having a different system. But still, these countries are dependent on trade with each other. Even though Australia, for example, decided not to use Huawei, there's still a lot of trade going between these 2 countries. How does that happen? Well, simply because they have a very small trade agreement, which only affects trade. It's not an agreement like we have with Mercosur, with many other association agreement. It's really a trade agreement. And if this small, tiny trade agreement works perfectly, this is why, even though they have a lot of differences on the political side, on society side, on many different issues when it comes to free press, etc., still trade works very well. And I believe what we did wrong probably when we were negotiating Mercosur over 20 years, it's always trying to oppose our idea on the Western side, or not the Western side, that's the wrong discussion because we're talking about a transatlantic discussion. On the European side, if we try to oppose our ideas, and that's including France, including the Netherlands, other countries that are opposed to this or that are now getting very skeptical about this this Mercosur this Mercosur agreement, I think we really have to clean in front of our own door. That's the German saying, rather than always telling the others how dirty their front door is. So let's stop doing this. Let's stop colonialization other countries with our ideas. Let's first get on the table, ratify this very important trade agreement. So then afterwards, once we have the agreement, that's when we start really working together, cooperating, and trying to solve the issues that up to now we couldn't solve on an international basis. That's my personal opinion. And I think many of my party within the German Bundestag, they feel the same. And I will very much work for it and hope that this project will be hopefully get the next steps done within the presidency, the European presidency of Germany. Up to now, the government is still behind this project, and we hope that it will continue. And I certainly will assist our government in continuing the next steps to ratify this very important project.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alexander. That's good that you addressed the critical voices, which obviously since negotiations started, have accompanied this treaty. Nicolas is doing this, so we definitely have to address them. And all 3 of you are very cozy pro-trade, obviously, but we already had questions, critical questions regarding deforestation and everything. So we should address them, right? I would like to quote 1 or 2 things I collected. For example, Martin Häusling parliamentarian said it's worse than we expected. And the French Minister of Agriculture, Didier Guillaume, he said, never in my life I will sign this deal. It's dangerous for our farmers and the environment. So, Nicolas, you said you volunteered.
Yes, yes, because I would like to follow up something that my colleague just said. I couldn't be more agree with my colleagues in terms of in the end, these agreements go beyond a kind of narrative between free trade and protectionism. This is in the end rules, what this type of agreement gives to economic actors is a floor and a ceiling of rules that you can be agreed or disagreed, but you can be sure that there won't be major surprise when you go to that market, when you have a treaty. So it's interesting when we have this kind of critics, of course, there are many environmental issues, not only in the Latin American side. You know very well that even in the European side, you have many challenges there and problems still, in process. But the issue is, we will not solve that problem with no agreements. With the agreement itself, you are giving, again, economic actors at least a floor and a ceiling in this context. And this means a lot in this context of total uncertainty. Yeah. So even from a geopolitical way, and now thinking a little bit from the European side, there is no better strategy when you have a strong competitor like Latin America, because we know that in many sectors, we could be a strong competitor for Europe, but there is no better strategy to have it close to you and know what he's doing. Yeah. And again, what are the maximum and minimums of these relations? Without an agreement, you have, from Latin American sides, you have hands-free to do whatever you want, to go ahead with China and maybe to have, indirect subsidies from the China relation, etc. And my last point, again, more from a geopolitical point about that, if the EU decides not to ratify the agreement, believe me that Mercosur is thinking in many other fronts that could be even more challenging for the EU. First, the European Free Trade Area, we have a negotiation in process, Canada, South Korea, and Singapore. So this triangulation of trade from Latin America to another region could be even more challenging for Europe than signing an agreement and knowing which is the ceiling and the floor again of these trade relations.
Yeah, good point. Dr. Heinzel, you?
Yeah, I just want to. There were two questions here written by spectators, which I already tried to answer, writing something down, but I want to address it. I want to address them because I think both questions are very important. Yes, we have the issue with the actual Brazilian government, to be frank, that it seems not to behave like we would expect a government to behave in environmental matters. But first, we don't do a free trade and a cooperation agreement with one government, which lasts 4, 8, more likely 4 than 8 years. But we do a cooperation agreement with many states for a long, long time and with a strategic perspective. Governments change. They also change in Europe, even in Germany sometimes. Not so often, but sometimes. Yeah? And so we should know that we don't do a free trade agreement with this government, but we do it with Brazil. And Brazil is much more than the Brazilian government. Uruguay is much more than the Uruguayan government. We do an agreement with society. We do an agreement with trade, with industry, with civil partners. We do it with everybody and for the sake of everybody. You see that I really, really believe in free trade. And I really believe in cooperation. And the second matter related to the first is, if we have an agreement, we have a formalized channel where we can address all the issues we have.
Yeah.
If we don't have an agreement, we haven't this channel.
Yeah.
And I'm not only responsible for South America, for Latin America, but also for North America.
You are the one.
And it would be so great in the actual complicated situation with extraterritorial sanctions, with all these trade issues, with the tariff issues we have, with the local content we have with the local content regulations we have through USMCA. It would be so great if we had actually now a free trade agreement with the United States, but we haven't. And so we have really, and Alex, you can confirm probably, it's so difficult to discuss with them not having this formalized channel. And this is because I want to have this formalized channel to the Mercosur, with the Mercosur countries as soon, as big, and as open as possible.
Yeah. We might add that, for example, the Paris Convention of Climate is part of the agreement. So yes. This is what you refer to in the sense of that, as it is a part of it, the hope obviously is that Brazil, for the beef and soya production, whatever, that they would adhere to the Paris Climate Convention. Alexander, do you think Brazil would do that if they were to sign this agreement?
It's a good question. I don't know, but let me pick up again on probably what Mark just stated, because I just followed some of the F&A and if I look at most of the questions are very much on the issue of human rights, of deforestation, of Brazilian issues. Do we really believe that without Mercosur, the situation will get better in Brazil? Do we really believe we save this Amazonas forest by not signing, by not ratifying the Mercosur? Because this is what they are actually telling us. Just these days, I think yesterday or the day before, we had a new assessment by Miserio and some other organizations, Greenpeace and the Catholic Youth Organization, stating once again it was right by the Austrian government or by Sebastian Kurz and now Green Coalition to decide not to ratify this in the circumstances giving this Mercosur agreement. But what would this mean? What actually is the benefit to either the people in the Mercosur states or the Amazonas or the human rights situation or the sustainability? There is no benefit if we don't get the agreement done. It doesn't mean that with the agreement, everything gets better. But one thing is absolutely wrong. We are always being told things get worse once we ratify this agreement. I would put this at I'm quite convinced this is not the case. The opposite will take place. Probably not because the Mercosur agreement puts in all the details what other countries have to do, but because what we do with this agreement, we promise them some prosperity. And it's just as simple as that. Prosperity is needed, so people are willing to pay attention on other things, such as human rights, such as nature, such as ecological, environmental issues. But first of all, we need to talk and we need to cooperate and we need to help these countries getting a level of prosperity. And we definitely won't help them by not going onto the agreement. And I think it's as simple as this, and we just always have to communicate it in a new way. It's the wrong way of telling people, no, sorry, you cannot take part in this trade, rather than telling them, we will help you.
Yeah, thank you. Nicolas, you seem to agree?
Yes, no, so I'm totally agree and supporting Alex's point. I think also that, even from the Latin American side in Mercosur, I can talk from Uruguay, we also are very critical with these issues, deforestation and environmental issues from Brazil and many other countries that could have the same problem. Sometimes Argentina with other kind of issues, but again, they are also problematic. But again, without the agreement, the only thing that we are losing is a partner now, like the EU, to give and put these critics and also be very critical with Brazil about these issues. Again, but this is a first step for the conversation, and totally agree with Alex, and even from a more pragmatic country like Uruguay, that without this agreement, we are putting all this sort of defense even in a worse scenario, because we don't have a very important partner to start changing this kind of environmental and again, very important political, sometimes economic issues that we have in Latin America.
Yeah, I would like to address Dr. Heitz, please go ahead.
There are two related questions. I always look into the questions because it's very interesting. And one is related to Argentina, and one is related probably more to Brazil. And both are addressing this this critical part. Yes, we have in Argentina a government for whom import substitution is the holy grail. We had this several times in the history of Argentina, and we had always the same outcome. The outcome was a default. I'm simplifying a little bit, but I have no time to discuss this matter in a longer way. So Argentina, with its protectionism, has lost much of its competitiveness it had still 10, 20, 25 years ago. So we believe that even Argentina, although we all accept that they are in a difficult situation, which is not only entirely their fault, but they are in a very complex situation, even for them, on the long run, open markets would be better because it would grant them access to the world markets with their products. And Argentina has very good products.
Mm.
That's the one. That's one point. And the second point is the question about how a channel can be used after the signing of the treaty to assure the compliance with environmental regulations. Well, I could make it easy for me and say that's a political question, and the political questions are for Alexander Kulis, as he is a member of the parliament. But I'll try to say one or two sentences about it. There are many ways to do so. First of all, the pressure, the public opinion, and the civil society of Europe, and especially of Germany, is putting on the Brazilian government is already showing results. I see this in what I see and hear in Brazil, what the Brazilian government sends to us on proposals to improve the managing of the environmental questions, because they see that how they did it until now, at least with their words, it didn't work very well for them. And they see it in the market. They see people not buying Brazilian beef because of the environmental issues. And this hurts in the pocket. So yes, there is a lot you can do. There's a lot everybody can do. And I think this has an effect. The other thing is we can formally address government to government, European Union to Mercosur and vice versa. Look, you are doing something wrong here. We have to talk about it. Then there is a mechanism of dispute resolution, which is not already the fastest, but which normally between good partners leads to a resolution, which means a progress for both. So there are many possibilities if we have a treaty. There are not many possibilities if we have no treaty. So we should have a treaty. Sorry, I'm repeating myself.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And the treaty and the compliance with environmental regulations, with many questions about this topic. Are you confident that, I mean, we cannot tell. We cannot really know that all partners really will try to comply. Alexander Kulis, do you think could we really trust? I mean, talking about Argentina, for example, it withdrew some days ago, then it came back. I mean, stability, political will, Nicolas, these are your key messages and words and hope. Can we trust? Is the political will to just make this big, huge historical treaty a reality? Is it there? Knowing that political stability, political will, especially in Latin America, might not be there all the time.
Yes. From a Latin American perspective, you know, when you sign a treaty, it's between states, or of course, in this case, regional and projects. But of course, government could change. Just to give you an example, the next election, if nothing changed in the context of Mercosur, will be in October 2022 in Brazil. So it's interesting when we heard so many concern about Bolsonaro, but we have two more full years he will be in government, and we never know what could happen after Bolsonaro. Will Brazil continue there with another president? Again, someone could be agree or disagree with Bolsonaro, and that's fine. But the point is, this is not about government, this is about states. And of course, the enforcement of this agreement is always a challenge, not in the Latin America and the EU side. It's always a challenge when we talk about Asian countries. But again, nothing works without the treaty. At least when you have a treaty, you have rules to go to the WTO and said, you signed this agreement and you have to fulfill that, and again, goals and rules. And I would say that from the experience we have in Mercosur, there was always a tradition of fulfill that, rules that we signed. Again, Brazil and Argentina, of course, are always challenging countries in terms of the government and the internal politics and the domestic politics we have. But again, at least you have an agreement to put that concerns in the table and say, okay, here we have that rules and we have to fulfill them.
Yeah. Thank you very much. But talking about skepticism, Alexander, EU skepticism, where is the big yes when it comes to this treaty? I mean, as of July 1st, Germany will have the EU Commission, the presidency. Do you think Germany can have a certain push? Or talking about Corona, is it really a first thing on the agenda of recovery that we're talking about this treaty, especially in Corona times and post-Corona times?
Well, none of us have the glass bulb to foresee the future in the Bundestag, but I'm very happy that at least our foreign minister, Heiko Maas, at the beginning of this month, he was still very much in favor of the treaty, saying yes, that for him, it's one of the most important aspects to get the treaty ratified. And also thanks to Dr. Heinzel and his organization, the DAHK, that once again have fostered on the German government how important it will be to finalize this deal. But you're absolutely right, Ms. Beck, that one of the issues is we should lead with an example. Now, we cannot criticize Latin American instability, political instability. It's not really instability, but of course they have way bigger shifts from left to right and back again, as we've just seen in Argentina. But let's lead by example. In Germany, or not in Germany, but in Europe, it doesn't make sense if in Europe we've been negotiating for 20 years and now once again we open up all the chapters. We're not happy if we don't renegotiate this stuff. How can we expect other countries, including the Latin American partners such as Argentina, that if we don't lead by example, why shouldn't they be doing it? And I mean, if we see what Donald Trump, we've been talking about him today already, if he starts renegotiating everything that in the past Obama and other presidents did and said at some point, okay, but I'm not happy with this deal with Iran, I'm not happy with whatever reason, and starts stepping out of the WTO, World Health Organization, not paying money anymore, etc. If they, as the most powerful nation and probably most powerful nation in the world, do not lead by example, how do they expect other countries to do so? And that also counts on our sides. So if we look at the Netherlands, France, Austria, at the moment, after many, many years of negotiation, of course, those were people negotiating already before the actual government, but still, I think this is a problem we really have to tackle it at some point. We really have to get the nod to be made. And of course, there's the media and many things that us in Germany, we believe about Mercosur, we hear about Mercosur, the critics about Brazil, those are very much driven also by the public opinion. France was already mentioned in the FNA earlier on. Indeed, France has a completely different approach when it comes to the lobby of the agrar sector is way bigger in France than it is in Germany and other European countries. And if you ask me personally, I believe also if Macron steps out and says, well, one of the issues is the deforestation of the Amazonas, why France is at the moment not willing to, or is skeptic at least on ratifying the deal, I believe it's way more than just being skeptic because of the Amazonas. It's once again, it's the lobby in France, a very strong lobby that is leading to the fact that the French president doesn't really have a different option than standing up. And the argument he uses is not the real argument why France is against it. And this is also very dangerous. But let's be honest about it, also in Europe. There is sometimes different interests that lead to the fact that we do not want this deal to be closed. And I've seen some of the F&A, and once again, but I'll leave it there. I mean, there's a lot of very interesting questions.
Yeah, exactly. There are elections in France next year, right? Which could be part of the agenda, right?
Well, definitely. Most of the time, if we have these discussions, it's all about national elections. It's not about Brazilians saving the forest. It's not about human rights in Brazil. It's about winning a national election. And it's because our people demand that we need certain standards international-wise. It's not about the standards in Germany, the standards in Europe, or the standards in France. It's about our people demanding these standards in Saudi Arabia, in Brazil, in other countries. And that's why politicians are being forced in doing it for their national elections. That's a miracle behind the whole story.
Yeah, Dr. Heinzel is sighing heavily. Yeah, hearing that, obviously, it's no help for free economy, obviously. Yeah, but
simple. In a former life, I was in politics, so I know this. I know this caring for elections, which today I haven't to do anymore, and I'm rather happy about this. But I understand naturally the political issue of satisfying the people in their own country is always a very, very important matter, and it naturally influences. We are living in the real world. We are not living in a university where we make fictional treaties. We are living in the real world, and we have to cope with the issues of the real world. But I have lived in Brazil for 5 years, a long time ago, but I think I know the country rather well. And I'm not very concerned. I'm very concerned about the Amazon basin, but I'm not concerned about the willingness of the Brazilian society to protect the rainforest. I doubt in them less than I doubt in many Europeans in their willingness to protect our nature, really.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, and I think as I told earlier, but deepening it, I think we should trust our Latin American friends, be it in Argentina, be it in Paraguay, be it in Uruguay, be it in Brazil or in other countries. We should trust them more.
Yeah.
They know, as we know, what is to do. We sometimes, I think we make the error, and this is a very European and especially a very German error, that we sometimes think we know everything better.
Yeah.
We don't do.
That was a little bit like Alexander said, don't prescribe, but just live it and be respectful.
Just trust them. And there was one question here. I'm unable to answer all these questions. I think we all are. But the question about soy and beef in the Amazon basin. The issue of the Amazon basin is not soy and beef, because soy and beef is a highly intensive, highly mechanized agriculture, which is done in regions with a good infrastructure. And Brazil is actually leading a big and a very expensive program to rehabilitate degraded soils in the middle of Brazil, far away from the rainforest, to make them reusable for agriculture. You don't plant 1,000 hectares of soy in the Amazon basin. This doesn't work, simply.
Yeah.
It never worked, and it will never work. You need infrastructure.
Okay.
The problem of the Amazon basin and the deforestation is a problem that the Brazilian state is not there, that law enforcement is not there, that there in many regions of the continent, not only in Brazil, there is no presence of public order. And if we want to help Latin America to solve these problems, we have to assist them in make this presence of the state stronger,
Okay.
and not weaker.
Yeah, we get it. Thank you very much. As we are on the final stretch of our discussion, I would like to come back to our title where we said opportunities in times of uncertainty. And obviously, Corona is the big thing. Hopefully, we are very soon talking about a post-Corona time, but we are still far away from it. And just quoting Inter-American Bank of Development, the gross domestic product had to be adjusted already. While in January 2020, they said it would be 1.6% of growth, they are now saying it will be minus 1.8 or worst 5.5 slowdown. So, Nicolas, what would you say, Corona and the economy, and while we are talking about this treaty?
I think, yes, I think this is an enormous opportunity, this treaty. Again, highlighting and concentrated the discussion in the matter of certainty, that we are living today in a context of total uncertainty. We don't know what will happen even next month. Yeah. So I think we have to concentrate our attention in certainty and the trade part. Of course, there are always qualitative part in this type of agreements, and this is the huge part of this agreement is quantitative, and how we can, have better and fair trade between both sides of the Atlantic. So again, I will highlight that the opportunities here is two things. First, the trade part of the agreement that again is huge for both sides of the both regions, and also the part of the signal. If we want from the Western side of the world and give signals to the rest of the world about free trade and global integration in a context of the current stagnation of multilateral system, I think Latin America and the EU could be key actors in this new world order that we have, and probably, to start after this pandemic and crisis. So again, this is an opportunity not from the quantitative side, but also in the qualitative, giving some signals to the rest of the world that there are one emerging region and one developed region, coordinating with the Western side for this new global order that I'm sure we'll have after this pandemic.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Nicolas. We have a question. Justus Lenz is asking, what do we lose if the agreement is not finalized in terms of growth and political capital? And Nicolas, you already answered partially. Is there anyone else? Alexander, what do you think? What do we lose in terms of growth and political capital if this agreement will not be signed?
Well, on the long run, we lose influence. That's, I think, the point we have to talk about. There was another question, FNA, asking, what about Xi Jinping? What about Donald Trump? Will they be the winners if we don't get to sign the deal? Yes, definitely. And that's, I think, also what we have to address. Even if our issues, which we very dearly want to forward also to Mr. Jair Bolsonaro, I'm quite sure that Xi Jinping is not as interested as we are, but he will deal a great deal with many of these countries if he has the possibilities. At the moment, the Mercosur states, well, probably Argentina being special, but the others have a great interest on doing this together with Europe. They are very skeptic about the USA and about Donald Trump. They are just as skeptic about the Chinese. But if they don't get the chance, of course, they will look for alternative means. They will substitute this. And where is the substitution if it's not in Europe? Well, it might be in the United States, it might be in China. They will try to do it otherwise. So in the long run, we lose influence. And if we lose influence, it will be even harder to negotiate with our partners and our ideas of a sustainable global about anything about the human rights. Do you really think that Xi Jinping will foster human rights if he starts an agreement with the Mercosur states? Come on, that's naive. So let's really much focus on what we lose. We won't lose anything on the short run because we'll just be status quo. It will be like it is at the moment. Okay, we won't win anything, but we won't lose anything. On the long run, we will definitely lose because others will be the winners. And that was also one of the questions in the FNA. And I'm happy that you asked me this because I think we also have to put this on the table.
Yeah, thank you very much. But what is the recipe? I know that you're kind of fascinated by the Australia-China deal because you said they are just focusing on a very neat and a very very, very concise economic agreement. They leave outside questions of human rights, of sustainability, everything. And it works regardless ideological differences. So would that be the recipe to make trade deals more realistic and real?
Yes, because first of all, once we have this deal, we get up to the next step. If countries are dependent on each other due to trade, due to any, then you get into the next steps. It's very difficult to disgrace a country where you're dependent on. But look at USA, Russia, for example. There's not much trade happening there. For them, it's easy to sanction the Russians, to go for the Russians. For us, it was much harder because we have a way bigger trade. And I think if we have a working trade system, then in the next step, we can very much negotiate. And that comes along with development aid, for example.
Yeah.
Comes along with other, and that's where we really much get into a discussion. There will always be differences on the political side, and we always have to negotiate, of course, which is absolutely okay. And those political, it always depends on the regimes on both sides, on the governments on both sides, yes. But we have to find a sustainable and long-lasting way to cooperate, and the best to do so is trade. I'm absolutely in favor of that idea. Of course, I would have loved Doha to work. The Doha round never worked out. I would have loved the WTO to be reformed in a way that we could work on a global scheme with a multilateral organization. At the moment, it looks rather frustrating when I look at the WTO. So no matter what I look at, I have to look for the next best option. The option I was putting on the table is the least best option. I know about that, but at least it's a working option. It's still better than no option at all. And that's what we're heading to, in my opinion, at the moment. If we don't get this example, if we don't get Mercosur after 20 years time, this is a bad example for any other negotiation that we have ongoing at this moment all over the world. How shall we continue? How shall we foster so this is why I rather recommend having a small, neat agreement on things that we really agree on and continue from there rather than trying to put all the eggs in one basket at once and then not getting anywhere from the beginning. That doesn't help us.
Thank you, Alex. Nicolas, do you agree? Putting all
Totally.
eggs in a basket? Yeah.
Yes, and we always have this kind of concern in Latin America about ourselves, about the region itself. Imagine Uruguay, one of the strongest democracies in the world. So of course we have many challenges in the regions, and sometimes it's very complicated in terms of the politics in general, Argentina and Brazil. But again, we have to continue, in terms of development, not concentrating in governments but in states. And again, the best way to do it is to have this conversation, to have this kind of dialogues, to go ahead in this, and things that again could be from a specific context, but in the long term, I think would be strategic to be closer, one another, and try to solve it together.
Thank you, Nicolas. We've got a bunch of questions. I think we tried to address as many as we possibly could in this short time. We only got 3 more minutes left. Dr. Heinzel, did you want to step in?
Yes, just the last word.
Yes.
We live in a time of extreme uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen next, also because of Corona, but not only.
Yeah.
So we have to make decisions, and we have perhaps to take a risk. And in such a time it's a risk to do this agreement, but it's a bigger risk not to do it. And I'll finish with a sentence from my favorite writer, Primo Levi: "Se non ora, quando?" When, if not now?
Okay, thank you very much. That was always the finishing thing, because I wanted to ask if you had a magic wand, all 3 gentlemen there, to make this treaty come true. So you answered in a way. Thank you very much, Mr. Heinzel. Alexander Kulitz, if you had a magic wand to make this treaty really come through in times of uncertainties, what would that be? What would you do?
Well, if I had a magic wand, of course, I'd just wave it and everything would happen. Unfortunately, there is no magic wands. And I believe the first thing that I would very much try to do is to address to get back on a rational basis when we argue about agreements like the Mercosur agreement. Let's stop using all these soft and I wouldn't know, and sometimes even half truths. Not, I mean, if I read in the press and in the news some things and I know some other facts, I'm sometimes very disappointed in the way that we try to mobilize in a way with arguments that are just sometimes unfair. Let's try to be rational. Let's try to get back to the objective points rather than always trying to criticize things. And then once we have a common level and a common ground, let's try to define our common gemeinsame Nenner, the minimum that all of us are agreeing on, because that's the step where we can continue. But this would be my personal magic wand. Let's be rational, get back to the table, try to find the minimum ground, which we already have after 20 years of negotiation. And let's do this after 20 years, what we negotiated, let's get this done, because this is the minimum we all agreed on, and not restart everything after 20 years.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Nicolas, you started first, so you have the honor to finish. Please, your magic wand, your wish for the future of this treaty, what would that be?
Okay, of course, as an academic, it's difficult to have this magic wand, but sometimes we could try to understand what is going on in both sides. And again, I just want to say, about the signals of the agreement, not only concentrating this in the quantitative side, as I mentioned, that I would say that it's very fair from both sides. After studying the final text of the agreement, what we have publicly available, I would say that it's a very fair agreement from both sides. And so also we have to highlight in the signals, we are in a context right now that for sure many global value chains will be relocated in the world. And we'll be looking, for developed and developing countries like Latin America in general. So I think this is a very strategic moment for the EU and Latin America, and of course, Mercosur specifically, to start working together. And I said, we know that we have problems in both sides, because believe me, now that I listen, all the issues from the EU to Latin America, from Latin America, we see that you have many things to resolve, politically and also related with the environment sometimes. So we also think that you also have areas to cooperate. So again, this would be a huge signal in a context of protectionism and nationalism to say here are two regions, very different regions with many challenges working together to solve these global problems.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicolas. Thank you very much for your finishing words. Yeah, obviously here at Friedrich-Naumann, we believe that the treaty is obviously an opportunity in times of uncertainty. Thank you very much to all our panelists, Dr. Mark Heinzel, Alexander Kulitz in Barcelona, and obviously Nicolas Albertoni in Los Angeles. Thank you that you joined us. Thank you to all of you who stayed with us during this discussion, as we try to address as many of your questions as possible, and hopefully, you got something out of it. And hopefully we will talk again once this thing is signed. Hopefully it will be. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you, Anna. Friedrich-Naumann asked me to announce one of the next web talks, June 25th, in 2 days' time, 8 p.m., Chancen und Risiken für Menschenrechte im digitalen Zeitalter bei der Friedrich-Naumann-Stiftung. So this is the publicity part, and now thank you again for your time. Thank you for being with us, and stay healthy in Corona times, and see you soon. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Bye-bye.